Hey, Author Nation, it's Melody and your host for today. And this is Publishing Uncovered. I have to thank my friend Jeff for that title. But let me tell you a little bit about how we came to be. I have been in the publishing world for a very long time, and it has changed drastically over the years. And now that authors have a lot of agency in the world of publishing, there is also a lot of it's like a wild ocean these days with storms and some calm parts. But authors sometimes get they spend money, they don't get the results, they get misinformation. There's a lot that happens, and so I've decided I'm going to do a series where I'm either going to talk myself or I'm going to bring on an expert. We're going to talk about a topic, and it's going to be a real conversation, unedited conversation about an aspect of publishing. And today I'm bringing on Lillian Sue, and we're going to talk about public relations, because I've had authors spend a lot of money on that and get nothing. And I've had authors spend no money and get results. And I want people here to understand what the difference is between the author who's spending a lot of money and getting nothing, and the authors who are spending less or maybe nothing and getting results. So Lillian, she is a storyteller and she builds relationships, and this is the cornerstone of her business as a public relations coach and a publicist. So her job is to empower authors to gain the confidence to push past their limiting beliefs of fear, anxiety, imposter syndrome, to harness the power of public relations to achieve their goals of becoming global leading best-selling authors. And I'm going to ask Lillian, how do you do that work? Tell me a little bit about what you offer in order to get that done.
Sure, appreciate you for having me, Melody. But in terms of how I help authors as a PR, I really sit down with them in one-on-one sessions, whether it's individual sessions or part of my program, and I say to them, "Tell me where you're struggling. What are the goals that you want to accomplish? What have you been doing up until this point to try and accomplish those goals? And where are the gaps? Are you actually getting to where you want to go? And if you're not, let's explore a little bit of what could be holding you back. So, what sort of fear and anxieties do you have about getting out there and sharing your story? About learning how to build these powerful relationships and expand on your community and not see it as I'm trying to sell to a bunch of strangers and that doesn't feel good. So a lot of the work that I do with authors is really come down to changing their perspectives, building strong mindsets, and recognizing what sort of incidences can trigger their fear, their anxiety, their imposter syndrome, really dig deep into the root causes of those feelings and help them build healthy coping mechanisms to learn how to push past that. And in my line of work, I feel that you can't move forward with building a strategy and launching a campaign unless you have the tools to build a strong mindset, because mindset is one of the most powerful influences on your actions and whether or not you even choose to move forward with doing any kind of marketing for your books. And it doesn't even have to be PR, it could be email, it could be social media, it could be advertising. And I think a lot of the rhetoric in the industry doesn't focus nearly enough on mindset and tells a lot of authors that you should be doing XYZ in order to get results, but they don't tell them why. And most importantly, which I address in my business, they also don't tell them this is how you can make it work for you and tailor it to the goals that you want to achieve.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not a one size fits all solution when it comes to public relations. Now, before we go on a little bit more, can you just give us the public relations 101 for authors? Just like what is public relations?
PR is the strategic communications process that authors and brands can use to build relationships with their audiences and general public and cultivate their reputations. So the reason why you want to do this is, and why you want to build these relationships with the media and everything, is that an author can only get so far building their own platforms through social media and email to build an audience. At some point, that's going to plateau because all of that information about your book is only coming from you. Incorporating PR into your marketing strategy allows you to build relationships with media that have cultivated their reputations for months, if not years, building content that their audiences trust. So if you build a relationship with, say, a great podcast, for an example, and their audiences are looking for stories and expertise that you as an author bring to the table, if you show up on that podcast, some of that trust and credibility that that podcast has will be transferred to you. Their audiences will go, oh, because Melody appeared on this podcast, I think I should check out her books. I think I should check out her services. And what it can do is act as a shortcut, as a conduit to help authors get in front of their ideal readers, because it's impossible for us to connect with our ideal readers one on one all the time,
Yeah.
right? So building a PR strategy that allows you to harness these relationships and use them as conduits to get in front of your ideal readers is a great way to build your own reputation as
Mhm.
an author, and also help you get some really high quality content that you don't have to develop yourself, that's developed on your behalf, that then you can use to show your audience that you're building clout, that you're building your reputation, that you're getting out there and sharing your story. And there's a couple different ways that I'll cover really quickly that authors can do that. Earned media is one. So that is your reviews, your interviews, things like video features, lists, articles, that kind of thing. Thought leadership is when you get out there and you're writing blogs and articles for industry publications, like Forbes or Entrepreneur, or you're getting out there and doing keynote speeches or doing workshop presentations, webinars, that kind of thing. Community relations is also another branch where authors can really harness relationships that they build with local media. An example that I have is if an author has a book related to a pet adoption, let's say, and they decide to launch a series of events where they are doing book signings at animal shelters. That's a great way to raise awareness for a local cause. You can bring in the local media to do stories on the importance of that and shed light on what their book is about and why it's important and the impact they want to make on their local community. So some of that is just a couple of the different ways authors can use PR. Paid media is also another strategy they can use in partnership with earned media. So if you want, say, an interview with a particular TV station and they set it up so that you can buy some airtime for an ad that reinforces your, let's say, your book signing or whatever event you're doing, plus you also do an interview either on site or in studio that talks more about your book and gives people more context.
Okay. Right. So we have earned media. That's when somebody else has a platform like a podcast or a newspaper or an online newspaper or something, a TV show, YouTube channel, and they bring me to their platform because I've earned my way there, and their people will see me. And then there's community engagement. Tell me if this is wrong, where I might host a number of events where I'm going out myself and creating events and creating opportunities to engage with larger numbers of people who are interested in what I write about. And then there's paid media where I might pay a YouTuber to be on their show, or I might pay for a placement of an article in New York Times, or I might pay for, to be on a podcast that has 1 million followers. Do I have that right?
Yes, and community engagement is specifically for local and regional. So it's really about, building those partnerships and relationships with local media outlets, community partners, businesses, nonprofits, that type of
Okay.
thing.
All right, perfect. Excellent. Okay. So let's now we know who you are. We've got a good sense of what public relations is. Let's start talking about some of the things that authors hear, and are they correct? Are they not correct? And I'm going to start with a story that I have. I had an author come to me, and they had paid thousands of dollars to have an article placed in, and I can't remember the name of the media outlet, but it was something like the New York Times, or something like that. It was, they spent a lot of money. They had one article placed once for thousands of dollars, and they were so upset. They were not my client for the placement, by the way, just to be clear. They came to me after they'd paid someone else for this placement, and they came to me and they said, public relations doesn't work. I spent thousands of dollars. I had an article placed, and it got me nothing. And I said, but nobody knows you, right? So if Beyonce pays thousands of dollars for an article in the New York Times, everyone's going to read it because everyone knows who Beyonce is. But if you're if you're not already known, paid media isn't going to be helpful. Am I right or am I wrong?
I think that there's definitely merit to that argument in the sense that
Yeah.
I've always counseled my author clients to not look at the mainstream as the be all end all in terms of a outreach method that they can use to reach their ideal audiences. And the reason for that is because just because that particular outlet reaches thousands or millions of households does not mean that those audience members are your ideal readers,
Mhm.
first of all. And you need to really think about, it could be that much more powerful to get in front of 200 people who will read your book and who are interested versus getting in front of 200,000 people who couldn't
Mhm.
care less, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, I would also caution authors to not, even if you can't afford it, right? Don't spend your entire budget on one opportunity and expect it to pay dividends thousands of times over, because your audiences, if you are targeting your ideal readers, they are spending their time on a wide variety of platforms, different parts of social media with groups and different platforms. They're listening to different podcasts, they're reading different websites, different newspapers, maybe they have magazine subscriptions. They're all over the place. So spending that amount of money on one opportunity, I would advise against it because of the fact that not everybody's going to see it when you want them to see it. In addition to that, an opportunity is only beneficial if you have both the experience and foundation to really harness it properly. And what I mean is, this is another reason why I really tell my authors to cut your teeth and get comfortable building the foundation of your media experience with the smaller outlets first. So your podcasts, your blogs, your YouTube shows, those kinds of folks, in order to really know, number one, how you're going to show up on the higher profile stages. Make sure that you've worked out the kinks, They're not going to ask you questions that you can't answer or you don't feel comfortable answering. And on top of that, when you build that foundation of the podcast experience, the reviewers, the YouTube shows, all of that kind of thing, you gain more knowledge on how to promote it properly.
Mm,
Because an opportunity will not benefit you if you do not promote it. And on top of something like with paid media, I also caution my clients to use it sparingly. Because what can happen is that if you pay that amount of money to be featured somewhere because it guarantees you placement, it comes through to an audience. And when they see that, that's not genuine, it's not authentic, there's not a relationship there that has been built. Sometimes it can be quite jarring for audiences to have an ad or an article when it's completely unrelated to something they're looking at, and that will turn them off as well.
yeah,
So for me, it's not an investment that I would make. And it doesn't mean that PR doesn't work. What's not working is the strategy behind it.
right, right. So paying a lot of money for one placed article is not usually a good strategy for public relations.
No, certainly not if you don't, or as you put it, already have that well known reputation that you've cultivated over years and that you've built the foundation for.
Yeah, all right, perfect. Thank you. Um, Tell me about a misconception that you see in the industry perpetuated, and like tell me, maybe a story or just give us some facts around it, and then let us know what people should be doing instead. I'm sure you have lots of horror stories yourself.
I've talked to a lot of author clients over the years, Melody, both in my audience and those who do end up working with me afterwards. And there's a couple of different myths that they tend to buy into, and I'll just go into some of them really quick. It's for the ones that don't even feel comfortable trying publicity at all, they tend to come to me with the belief that, I need to have an audience in the thousands, or I need to spend 20, 30, $40,000 per campaign in order to really see any kind of results or penetration.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I have to say to them that, first of all, it's not about the size of your audience, it's
Hmm.
about what you choose to do with it. And also what your ultimate goals are. So if
Yeah.
you have a goal, for an example, to increase the sales of your book through both online and in-person distribution, what are some of the ways that you can build on that by building partnerships with different stores, by doing book signings, going to book festivals, maybe doing partnership programs with other authors to make it lucrative for a whole bunch of you. And all of those things are things that your audience responds to, and so do the audiences of the partners, the distributors, and other collaborators that you're working with, which can then grow your audience, right?
Yeah.
Same, and that can also go along. I know there's book box opportunities out there that will do interviews, giveaways, other forms of earned media that you can then leverage and utilize as high quality content to continue to grow your audience the more you promote it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to cost 20, 30, $40,000 for you to do that effectively. But what you need is that solid strategy and concrete goals that you're willing to work towards.
Yeah.
Another one that I've heard from a lot of authors who have gone through PR campaigns have said to me, I worked with a PR agency. I paid, 5 figures on a campaign, and I got results. Like I got interviews and I got reviews and everything, and it was great. But it didn't ultimately translate into book sales for me. And when I sat down with them and I asked them why, I said, what do you feel like was the disconnect there in terms of where they pitching you or maybe having you featured versus where you actually wanted to go. And they said to me, I felt like because the publicist was the expert, I didn't feel comfortable
Mhm.
advocating for myself and my goals in order to, because I believe that they had it in hand, they knew what they were doing. And when they said, hey, we want to pitch you for all of these different outlets, I thought it would work. And what I say to them is, any publicist that's ready and willing to truly work with you to build a tailored campaign that's going to work for your book and your goals and your strategy is going to want your input. So the key here is to be able to feel confident enough in your voice that you can advocate for yourself and tell them this is where I want to go with things. Because
Mhm.
for me, I will not work with a client who is not willing to work with me to
Mhm.
launch the best campaign possible. And I do that because ultimately it's the author's book that's out there, it's their brand, it's their reputation that's on the line. I can make my suggestions based on my experience, my knowledge, absolutely, but it needs to align with where the author wants to go.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we have two things here. The myth number one was public relations uh, doesn't work, or I can't do public relations. And the answer to that is yes, you can have goals and build a strategy around it. Smart, start small and build. And then the second piece was I've put time and energy and a lot of money into campaign, and it didn't get results. And the your response to that is, again, you don't have to spend five figures for a campaign, but you do have to be involved in the campaign so that you know it matches your goals and they're using strategies that make sense to those goals that are yours, not goals that some PR firm has set up for you. Am I summarizing that okay?
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. Now, so related to that, I am a podcast host and I have a weekly show that I go from September to May. That's my season length. And I get pitched all the time. So authors are paying PR firms to pitch. And I get pitches from children's authors. I get pitches from sci-fi authors. I get pitches from, you know, so like I get pitches that are sometimes barely related to a book. And I only interview nonfiction authors. And if that PR person had listened to one episode, just one episode, they would know that they are wasting their time and my time and that author's money pitching me to interview a children's author or a sci-fi author on my podcast. Is this what you're talking about, spending five figures and not getting the results?
It can definitely be part of that. What I've also seen quite a bit in my industry is that there are PR professionals that will say to authors, I can get you in Forbes, or I can get you in the New York Times, or I can get you in the Wall Street Journal, major, major mainstream
Yeah,
publications and platforms. And
yeah,
I think a lot of authors, going back to a previous point I made about the fact that mainstream may not always be best when it comes to what your story is, why it matters, and who you are as an author.
yeah,
A lot of this is, they can get sucked into the promise of a guaranteed placement in these mainstream outlets without spending the time to sit down and figure out, is this actually right for me? Is it actually right for my book? Would it actually make sense for me to appear on this platform because my audience is there. So I see a lot of that, and that's in part a big reason why a lot of PR firms out there can charge what they charge,
Right.
because they say we can get you on these major platforms that can get you in front of millions and millions of eyeballs and ears and households, but it doesn't take into account of like, okay, is this actually ultimately going to help me sell more books? Is it going to help me build credibility with my audience?
Yeah.
And am I actually going to get out there in front of the right people?
Exactly. Yeah. Now, is this a misconception that's perpetuated by the industry, or is this a misconception that authors have and push the industry into offering things that aren't working?
I think it can often be more of a industry misconception. It's a lot of it has to do with the fact that it is competitive. They want authors to spend more money in order to guarantee placements because it is competitive and because today's media landscape is such that a lot of newsrooms all across the US and Canada are shrinking. Therefore, a lot of reporters are dealing with less resources. So, getting those placements and getting those features today is much harder than it was, say, 20 years ago.
Right,
So a lot
right.
of that is, authors, I think, end up buying into the fact that if I really want this publication, I have to be willing to pay for it
Mm,
without
okay.
thinking about like, okay, could this part of my budget be better spent diversifying my strategy instead
Hmm.
of playing for one article placement that, let's say, costs 7 to 10 grand? Could
Hmm.
I, as an example, do 3 book events and do maybe work with an influencer? Could I maybe run an actual PR campaign on top of that that would
Mm,
allow me to get the coverage that I want and to build the relationships that I want with the media that is actually going to get me in front of my readers?
mhm, mhm. Yeah. So, is there anything else we're missing in this area before I move on to another topic?
I think we've covered it, like, given a very strong overview just in terms of what authors need to watch out for, and also to have the understanding that, yes, you do need a budget for PR, but you don't need to spend 20 to $40,000 on one campaign, or worse,
Yeah,
one article placement or one ad in order to get in front of the right audiences.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And are there any other kind of big misconceptions or myths that we haven't touched on yet before I move on?
The probably the oldest one in the industry that has persisted for decades would be that any publicity is good publicity.
Oh, yes, okay.
I've seen it happen more than once where,
Yeah,
they think that, oh, if they're talking about you, then it's a good thing no matter what they're talking about. The
right.
fact of the matter is that in today's day and age, with the internet, with social media, and the fact that there's a lot of archival websites and footage and things like that, that if you are trying to build your reputation as an author, as a speaker, as a thought leader, those types of things can come back and bite you.
Yeah,
And it's really important that before you embark on any kind of campaign, that you do your research. You go back and take a look and make sure that if there is anything, and I'm talking anything from like controversial social media tweets all the way to you were in a barroom brawl as a teenager, that those kinds of things
mhm,
are scrubbed from the internet as much as possible, so that, if you're on a press tour, let's say you're on stage doing a live Q&A promoting your book, somebody from the crowd doesn't all of a sudden get up and go, I noticed that 20 years ago you said this.
Right.
Care to elaborate, right? So that's something that I think a lot of authors need to watch out for as well, and to do their due diligence to make sure that whatever can come back and bite them is controlled before doing a campaign.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense. Although I will say, I believe that people should be allowed to change and grow. And I have seen where on social media or in traditional media, digital media, where somebody has made a mistake 20 years ago, and then they've turned their life around, they're doing really well, and somebody finds out about this mistake and brings it to the forefront, and then they're crushed because of it, something they did. And I'm not saying they should have done it 20 years ago, but I think people are allowed to grow and change. And unfortunately, our society doesn't always allow for that. There's a certain segment, not everyone, who likes to kind of kick people when they're down. And I think that's what you're talking about. It's like, to protect yourself from that segment. Uh, Maybe we need to scrub it as much as we can. Not because we shouldn't be making mistakes. I just want to throw that out there. Yeah. Okay. So authors who are doing their own public relations campaigns, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see them making?
It comes down to having a solid, strong mindset is number one, because there will be pitfalls during a campaign. For example, if you send out a pitch and you don't hear back, or you send out a pitch and all you hear is rejections from reporters saying, "Oh, I don't have time to do this right now," or maybe it's not the right fit. Things like that can, if you allow it to, can really derail a campaign and feed into things like self-sabotage, because you start feeling like your story's not worthy of being told, you're not worthy of being featured in the media, and no one cares about what it is that you're trying to do. When you come across things like that, it's really important to remind yourself that you have other opportunities to diversify your strategy, to build relationships, to do other things to make it interesting for the media to bite on, right? And also, even if you get a rejection from somebody, that doesn't mean that the door's shut completely. If you get back a couple months later, maybe then they will say yes. That has happened over and over again for me, and I've been in marketing and PR almost 20 years now, and it's happened for me over and over again for my clients as well as for my own stories. The other thing is if you are doing your own PR, you have to first figure out, what is it do I want to that I want to tell people? What is it about my story and my journey that is compelling enough that I would want to tell people? I mean, there's all kinds of stories out there of people that have worked in corporate and then decided to leave and found a nonprofit and wrote a book about their journey. Things like that that can be really compelling about, why did you make this change in your life? What was the crossroads? These are the sorts of stories that they want to hear about, but you have to first nail them down.
Yeah.
Once you nail down the story, then it's a question of, how do you want to be represented on a audio visual level? So thinking about things like your author photos, thinking about how you want to display your books, thinking about some other interactive ways that they can hear from you, like doing video introductions to you as an author or your book, things like that. And once you have those parts figured out, then it's, who do I want to get in front of? Where is my ideal reader spending their time? Who out there is talking about the things that I'm passionate about similar stories to mine, or about similar subject matter to my book? Because the worst thing you can do is, A, not know what it is that you're telling people, because then your key messaging is all over the place and they're not going to understand what it is that you want to share with them. Number two, even after you have the message down, to share that message with the wrong people.
Mm.
It could very well be that for a lot of folks that keep getting rejections from the media, it could very well be that the people you're pitching are not the people that would be interested in covering it to begin. So
Mhm.
you really have to do your due diligence and your research to figure out who out there is actually supporting what it is that I want to speak on, and what can I tell them about my story that will make an impact with their audiences. Because every time you reach out to a producer, to an editor, to a writer, the main thing they're going to want to know when they look at your pitch is, okay, why should my audience care about this?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So it sounds like, and I'm just mindset is number one. And
Mhm.
once you've worked on your mindset, then it's the messaging, right? You really have to know who you are, what it's about. That's kind of then brand, right? So messaging brand. And then once you have your messaging, once you have your mindset and your messaging and your brand, then you're starting to get into strategy. Who, what, where, and all those details. Am I summarizing that well?
That's exactly it. You nailed it on the head.
Perfect. All right. Um, Sometimes, and this is goes back to kind of misconceptions a little bit, but not quite. But sometimes my authors come and they say, "Oh, I pitched a podcast, but they want to charge me money." So there's such a thing as earned media, and there's such a thing as paid media. How do we know we should be paying for it?
It comes down to, I would never tell my clients don't do it, because I feel like that sort of black and white thinking doesn't help them diversify their strategies. So, what
Okay.
I would say when it comes to any kind of paid opportunity is, number one, do your due diligence outlet. How long have they been around for? Have they featured higher profile authors that maybe you want to be featured alongside? What sort of promotions have they done for these other episodes? So are they doing things like uh, featuring them on their blogs? Are they doing social media ads for certain episodes? Are they saying that they have newsletter features for these podcast guests? What are they actually doing
Yeah.
based on your research that is actually worth the money? And that's definitely something that I encourage authors to ask the podcasters for as well. Like,
Yeah.
if they have a paid option, and I've seen this time and time again, where there are podcasts out there that will charge guests to appear if they want to expedite when their episode is released.
Right.
So things like that, like if you want your
Mm.
episode released earlier, then they have a nominal fee for that. But there's other things such as, are they willing to include things like ads to help promote your episode? Are they doing, so are you able to say record a 30-second ad that would help promote your interview and then promote your book? Is
Yeah.
that something that they include with the package? It really comes down to, is what they're offering worth the fee that they're charging?
Yeah.
Number one. And number two, if you choose to spend this money, this part of your budget on this opportunity, where else in your strategy and in your outreach methods right now are you going to have to cut back in order to afford this opportunity?
Yeah.
I came across an author who recently attended a webinar that I did on the pros and cons of publicity. And he said that he had an opportunity to appear on a uh, podcast for crime thriller authors. And the financial ask there was $5,000 that he could afford. So myself and the co-moderator for the webinar reached out to him and said, because he had asked us, I can afford this, but I don't know if it's worth it. So we gave him very much the same advice to say, what is actually part of that? Is it just the interview? Is he charging because he's talked to a lot of traditionally published authors who have won awards and things like that? Is he talking to Cheryl Strayed or, Sheryl Sandberg, or who's he talking to that makes that price tag worth it? And at the same time, we cautioned him. We said, to bank this much of your budget on one opportunity when there's no guarantees of audiences finding you is very, very risky. There are other ways that you can diversify your strategy and to make better use of your budget that will go farther to get you in front of the right audiences.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you. That's excellent. So what about, I'm kind of back at the, do-it-yourself PR author. Are there specific tools or resources that authors should be looking at to help them with their public relations?
I would say that I have some resources for authors in terms of a self-directed course that I also offer one-on-one coaching sessions as a part of when they get stuck on certain chapters and things like that. I have a master class that I offer that sort of covers the basics of how authors can position themselves properly in order to figure out the stories that they want to share. When it comes to saving time and energy on things like finding the right people to get in front of, finding the right media outlets, I always look there are tools like Rocket Reach where it's a bookmarklet that you can download for Chrome that you can use for LinkedIn. And what that will do is every time you sign in to the Rocket Reach platform and you're signed into LinkedIn, it'll give you the email address of the reporter or the writer or the editor that they signed up for LinkedIn with. So then you have a way to communicate with them. There are tools like that out there. I also really advocate for authors to do hashtag research is a great way to kind of look at on platforms who's talking about what and what sort of books are being reviewed. And I really can't stress enough that not enough authors out there look for recommendations and referrals within their own communities. So the other authors in the writer community, those that have gone on these different podcasts, maybe work with different reviewers, maybe work with influencers to launch their events, this kind of thing. Talk to them about their experiences. See what they recommend, see what they don't recommend. And in that way, they've already done some of the homework for you in vetting these opportunities. Another really good one is if you are a part of Facebook groups where there's a couple out there. Need a Guest is one. The podcast collaboration community is another one where there are a lot of podcasts out there always looking for guests and looking for different opportunities to feature authors and other entrepreneurs. Do your research to see who in the group has been on those platforms, right? Because if they have favorable reviews and everything, and these authors and these entrepreneurs are in your industry and they've written on similar subjects, that will tell you, okay, this podcast is a fit because their listeners are looking for what it is that I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, that's excellent. And so Lillian mentioned some courses. You can find them on her website. Is this correct, Lillian? And in retrospectwritingservices.com, can people find the courses there?
Yes, they can find the link to my courses there. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then Lillian also mentioned Rocket Reach and a few other Facebook groups. I'll get those from Lillian, and I will put them in the description after this conversation so you can also access them. And Lillian was talking about working with within communities, and this is something that we do at Author Nation. Uh, we've had authors who are publishing a book. Another author has a blog. They will do an interview. We've also had authors come to events and say, I'm looking for podcasts. And authors said, well, I've been on these podcasts. And then they come back and say, hey, I got on the podcast. And so I just want to reiterate what Lillian is saying. Find a community, Author Nation, another community. Find a community of authors, because that makes a huge deal in getting ahead as an author. Authors are all about collaborating, not about competition. We don't have to say, oh, if they read your book, they won't read my book, because that's not true, right? Car salesmen have to worry about that. Authors do not, right? Exactly. All right, Lillian, we've talked about the tools, we've talked about mistakes. What's the PR landscape is evolving rapidly. I mean, we have AI now, and it's constant. No longer traditional media. We have digital media. We have so many podcasts. This is a landscape that is evolving rapidly. Publishing is, and so is public relations. What do you see as the future trends and the future challenges for authors?
I think with the rise of AI, it can be really, really tempting, and this is also because there is a gap in the landscape regarding the tools and the resources. What I've seen is that there are not a whole lot of affordable tools on the market, unfortunately. Something like Rocket Reach is great, but then after that, you're looking at the platforms that are $100 a month, all the way up to $8,000 to $10,000 a year, that are complete systems that are geared more towards agencies building campaigns for their clients. And these tools will help them build media lists of on the thousands, and to
Mhm.
help them keep track and keep those updated, and to also do things like keep track of the media as it goes live, and then even help them do things like collate reports of the media coverage once it's done, so that they can share it with their clients, they can put it on social media, all of these different fancy things.
Mhm.
So there's always been this gap that exists in the landscape of affordable tools that can span the gamut of a media campaign, because you don't just want to do the research to help you find the right people to
Mhm.
build these relationships within the media. You also want to make sure that you're able to catch the coverage as it goes live, and make sure that you have the clips, the images, the articles, the links, all of those different things saved, so that you can share it properly with your newsletter subscribers, your social media audiences, all of that. And these tools exist to help people save time and energy. However, they're geared more towards the agencies. So with the rise of something like AI, what I tend to see can be still right now a bit of a gap is the fact that there are companies out there that can promise you things like, oh, we can generate a lot of leads for you. And we can do things like, this tool will mine the data from this platform, let's say LinkedIn or whatever it is, to help you find the right people. And I think the danger of doing something like that is relying too much on the technology to do that work for you, and not doing the due diligence to ensure that, hey, is this list actually accurate to what I want to do, right? And so that is kind of the danger that I see when it comes to relying on the tools and platforms that are supposed to save you time and energy that could fill in that price point, that gap that doesn't, that is currently pretty wide for most of the tools on the market that I've seen and that I've used. That's a really big thing that I feel like is coming into the industry and that is continuing to grow. And my fear is that there's not a whole lot of due diligence being done on, is this actually going to give me the leads that I want, the leads that I need, and actually grow my author business the right way.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Lillian, that was really useful. AI is a big question, of course, for authors in many regards, and it can be a really helpful in public relations, or it can mess you up a bit, So good points. Is there anything we're missing before we close up in relation to public relations and authors?
I wanted to talk a little bit just about, we've kind of focused on sort of the pros and cons of publicity as we've gone through in our conversation here.
Mhm.
But I do want to say that, for the a lot of people that are like, do I need to work with a publicist? What am I actually paying for if I can't guarantee results? Right?
Mhm.
Those are kind of the two big questions that I keep getting from authors over and over again in the workshops and the webinars that I've done over the years. And
Mhm.
as far as whether or not you need to work with a publicist, there are a lot of aspects. We touched upon this a little bit earlier, that authors can manage themselves when it comes to PR. So things like building their own media kits, right? Building their media lists, maybe developing a media pitch. The caveat there, of course, is that you need to have the knowledge and the confidence to do that. I wouldn't recommend authors spending the time and energy fumbling around doing that if they don't first have the knowledge and the confidence to do that, because it can cause you to spend a lot of time and energy. And when it comes to working with a publicist, and it's like, oh, I'm not getting guaranteed results, what you're paying for is effort and the knowledge, the expertise, and the relationships
Mhm.
that the publicist or PR agency can bring to the table that you don't may not necessarily have. It's one of those things where I always say to my author clients, in order to really make use of and streamline a relationship that you're trying to build with a publicist or a marketing agency or somebody doing your social media for you, it's not so much that you have to know how to do it, but you have to have an idea of, what do I want to do and where do I want to go to, right? In order to really make use of the time, the energy, the effort, the knowledge, and the relationships that the publicist has that you don't have. So it's not so much that you are paying for, because there are no guaranteed results, unfortunately, in the world of marketing. But what you're paying for is all of those aspects, and also the training and the knowledge that you get to get more confident with and comfortable with getting out there and sharing your story, building those relationships, and seeing that momentum grow properly to get your books out there for the right people. Going back to your previous story about the author who came to you and was not happy with the amount of money they spent for the New York Times. And to your point, no one knows you. And for that matter, no, you didn't have a relationship with these people that allowed you to get a feature that was better tailored to your goals, better tailored to your audience, and that would actually work with you and your strategy as opposed to against you. So it's one of those things. where so many authors have said, "Do I need a publicist? Is it actually worth it?" And I always say it comes down to what is your current strategy? What are you doing for marketing? How are you getting in front of your ideal readers? And most importantly, is what you're currently doing working
Mm, yeah.
to get you all of that? If it is not, consider what your options are in terms of diversifying your strategy, and public relations is just one branch of that, but it is a very powerful branch because it relies on building those relationships and telling your stories to the right audiences through the relationships you build.
Yeah. That's exactly it, right? Our email list allows us to talk to the people who already know about us and build a relationship with people who already know about us. Public relations, on the other hand, helps us by partnering with people who have an audience who don't know us yet, who may want to get to know us through this platform and then may move on to our platform, our email, or whatever that may be. So really well said, Lillian. Thank you so much for showing up today. I want to talk a little bit about Lillian's books, but I just want to give Lillian the final words her final words before I have my final words.
I just wanted to end off by saying for any authors thinking about publicity, the most important thing is for you to spend that time to sit down and actually think about, what do I want to do? How do I want to sell more books? What are the different ways I can get there? And what is currently stopping me from doing what I need to do to get there? And that is, what am I afraid of? What gives me anxiety? And where can I reach out for help with all of this?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Lillian, very much for coming and being candid and having a real conversation and really talking about what it's like. I know there are authors who don't believe they can do it, and I know they can. I know there are authors out there they feel they've been taken and they don't want to do it anymore. And so, this conversation was for both of those authors, and I hope it has been important for you. It's been powerful for you. And it's given you something to think about and hopefully some motivation to rethink publicity, rethink public relations, and use that as an author to build your audience and get more eyes on the words you have written because they are important. Now, I just want to tell, because I love authors, I love nonfiction authors, I want to tell you about Lillian's book before we head off. Lillian did a crowdfunding campaign a while ago, and it was very exciting to watch that process, watch Lillian go through that process. And so I just wanted everyone to know you can go to crowdfunder.com, publicity prescription, because her book is called The Powerful Publicity Prescription. And I think it's like just about to come out, right, Lillian? You're getting closer. You're getting closer.
I am, yes, and I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to announcing my book launch, which I do have a partnership program that I'm building for, and I'll also be doing things like subscriber-only giveaways and pre-order perks and everything, and hoping to do other events as well. So it's my goal to get this book out into the hands of as many authors and nonprofits and entrepreneurs as possible, because I really want them to not only gain the knowledge of how to build a successful strategy, but to gain the confidence on how to do that and really build that understanding of, they have the tools, the knowledge, and the resources to really achieve their goals, no matter whether it's, becoming a best-selling global industry leader or getting out there and doing more workshops and keynotes, whatever it is that they want to do. This is the book that I want to be their first stop.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much, Lillian. I've appreciated your time today. And thank you for joining us today. I hope that, as I said, this motivates you. This helps you kind of come back to the idea that you absolutely can do public relations. And it's a brilliant way to build partnerships and relationships that will help you long term with your author goals. Thank you so much for showing up today. and I will drop all those links in there for you. Please go ahead and share this with someone who you know needs this.